Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Red Team webinar on building teams that deliver. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We're going to be sharing on a topic today, talking about leadership in construction project management, specifically on the role of project managers and how the project management role has evolved and developed over the last several years, and the leadership skills that drive successful projects and outcomes, and how contractors can build a culture of accountability, clarity, and collaboration. We're going to hear from a couple of our leading industry experts on some common problems and challenges that we face in the real world today. So hopefully you'll be able to relate and chime in through the questions and answers as we get going this morning. And want to hear from you and on some challenges. And if you have any specific questions, we're going to round out our session today with some Q&A and hear a little bit more from our team. But joining us for the webinar today, we've got Jon Musselman from Musselman Construction. He is the president. They are a general contracting firm licensed in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, and specialize in commercial construction projects specializing in medical, government, retail, university work, specialty projects, and more. They've got a highly skilled team with almost 100 years of combined experience between them. So they're going to have a lot to contribute this morning as we talk about companies and company culture and the changing role of project managers. They've been a Red Team Flex customer since about 2019, and so have some expertise in using our technology as well in their business. So we'll hear a little bit about that. Also joining us is Craig Tate. He is our CEO here at Red Team. He's been with us for about a year, just celebrated his year anniversary, and we're so happy to have him join us for our webinar this morning. He's been guiding us and directing us and helping to speak into our continued development of the product, as well as the leadership overall for Red Team. So thanks for joining us today, Craig. And then we've also got Craig Fulcher, who is president and CEO of DWC Construction. They're here in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I'm located. They're a general contractor specializing in healthcare, law firms, tech firms, advertising agencies, restaurants, and more. Kind of a jack of all trades as far as tenant renovations and ground up work here in the Nashville area. They've been a client since 2006. They were one of our very first clients coming onto the Red Team Go product back in the day. So thank you all for being here. My name is Tracy Van Dalsum. I'm the Vice President of Red Team Go here at Red Team. And it's my pleasure to kind of be the moderator as we get going on our webinar this morning. But thank you all for being here. And we're going to dive right in and talk about the evolution of the role of the project manager and explore how expectations of the project managers have shifted from task managers to organizational leaders. So I'm not going to go through and read through the slides, but we want to get more into the conversation. So I want to hear from our panel this morning on how we've seen the role of the project manager evolve over the last 5 to 10 years. So would you all speak to that just a little bit in your experience and how things have kind of changed in our industry as far as project managers over the last 5 to 10 years?
You know, maybe not 5 to 10 years, Tracy, but certainly over the last 10 to 20 years, we've seen both at the PM role and the superintendent role, it's certainly much more of a collaborative approach than it used to be. The old school way of my way or the highway just really doesn't cut it anymore. It's much more of a team building rapport and establishing trust with other members of the team.
Yeah, and what I would add to that too, I mean, he's exactly right, because it's definitely, and the role has gotten a lot more complicated as a project manager because we've had more material delays through all the shipping problems that are out there. We've had more complications with price fluctuations, especially with some of these tariffs. And it's just gotten a lot more complicated now because instead of having a plan and going and executing, it always seems like you're shifting to plan B right out of the gate just because of some unknown thing. And we've gotten honestly where we can't even put a schedule together until we order the materials and get the lead times because they do fluctuate so much. So it's definitely changed a lot. It's evolved a lot over the last 5, 10 years. And here recently, it seems like the quality of labor, a lot of the experienced guys are are retiring, and the younger guys aren't always as well trained as they have in the past, and they don't have the passion for the job. So dealing with more quality of labor and trying to navigate that obstacle has also added a new complication to things.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into that in some future questions that we have. So we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more about that and maybe how you're working on overcoming that as we get going here in our conversation. But what are some key traits that you believe you're looking for in some high-performing project managers today? You mentioned that you're having trouble finding the quality, but what are some of those qualities that you're looking for when you're searching for project managers today?
A lot of it's, it used to be you were organized, you were on top of things, you had a plan, and that made a great project manager. And now you've got to be an effective communicator. And a lot of times it's really not just speaking clearly, but it's really reading the room and understanding what does a client really need? What are they're saying this, but what is really their big concern? And so a lot of it's trying to have the finesse to navigate towards an optimal outcome instead of just, okay, here are the facts. What do you want to do?
Yeah. Being a good expert of what's the question behind the question.
Exactly.
Yep. And I'll add to that, organized, definitely, some technical skills, definitely, good, energetic, yet level-headed, able to stay calm under crisis and under pressure. It has to be somewhat charismatic, which is a little bit different than an engineering technical background. But, as Craig said, you have to be able to read the room and build the rapport and, build that team. And you have to have some accounting skills as well, you have to be able to manage the dollars as well as the processes and the peoples and all that. And maybe almost as important as any of the others, you have to be able to, triage the situations. If you're a PM running, say, 3 different jobs, you might have 3 different crises going on at the same time on each job. And you have to decide which of those is the most critical fire to put out at that time.
Yeah. Those are almost the non-negotiables, the things that are hard to teach, right?
Yeah.
And I think those are all great points, guys. And I think those 4 on the left, the 2 in the middle there kind of go hand in hand. Being proactive problem solver versus being reactive requires sort of embracing the technology that enables that and being data driven in the way you go about looking at the project and the teams and sort of what are actionable insights that come out of that. So being comfortable and embracing the technology is an important aspect, I think, today, probably more than ever. There's more tools than ever, and it's harder than ever to keep up with the technology. And so a project manager today needs to be sort of comfortable with that and sifting through what's important versus what's urgent and managing it accordingly.
Yeah, because to add to that, I mean, when you've got a meeting where there's things that are outside your control and the job's getting off track, you've got a lot of very anxious people waiting to be comforted to know that their project is not completely off the rails. So having the data at your fingertips so that you're quoting in real time, this is what we've got. If you look here on the drawings on my iPad, showing them exactly what the problem is, having the information allows the project manager to talk from an expert position, and that they know what's going on and just not like, well, I don't know, we're going to figure something out,
And they also have to be able to delegate well so that they don't get so wrapped up in nitty-gritty details that they lose sight of the big picture. They have to be being proactive and looking ahead and letting other members of the team focus on some of the very, very detailed type items.
I had a mentor once as I got into a level of responsibility above just, sort of frontline management, moved up in the organization. And I think it's analogous to what project managers deal with, who told me, you have to balance, now that you're in this role, you have to balance between the view from the dance floor and from the balcony, right? And the dance floor is, for a project manager, that's the mixing it up every day on the job site and doing all those things that you have to deal with on a daily basis. But it's important to lift yourself up out of that and get up into the balcony. That gives you a different view that's a little more strategic, that puts the big picture into context, right? How you're dealing with all of the constituents involved in a project, not just the teams on the ground, but your customer being the owners, the architects, all those folks. And so sometimes that's difficult to do during the day. So you have to kind of consciously think about getting up on that balcony every now and then to get that view. That advice, I got that advice probably 30 years ago, and it still sticks with me.
Yeah, that's good advice, and it actually leads us right into our next slide of some differences between managing and leading, because there are some key differentiators from being in the weeds and being a good manager of the task to being a good leader, and not only leading the project but being a leader of the team and setting the direction and continuing to push things forward. So I wanted to see if you guys would share some examples maybe of a time when a project manager's leadership made a critical difference in a project outcome.
We had a project, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, Tracy, and kind of going back to some of the traits of a good PM as well. And it was replacing 2 different sets of stairs in a 5-story parking garage for the city of Charleston. And we had just a fiasco on the stairs. But our PM had built such a rapport with the head architect and had established so much trust that what could have just been a disaster, we were able to work through very easily. And because the architect knew that, when our PM said, we're going to take care of it, we'll make it right, that we would do so. And it made all the difference.
That's awesome. That rapport matters, right? When they have that calm personality and really get to know the project team members, and that goes such a long way in helping to calm things down and give some reassurance. Yeah.
Well, as Jon said, the key difference is a lot of people say it's not my job. And it's not a project manager that says it's not my job is doing just their job. And, but sometimes when they do, getting the project to a win-win situation is now their job. And, a really random example that just happened 6 months ago, we had a broker that came in and they were going to lease, this client was big, they were going to lease multiple floors. And we were $400,000 over what would allow the deal to be made. And so he reached out to the broker and he said, hey, can I just go talk to the client? Can I talk to your client to see what their needs are? And he talked to them. And then through discussing, in talking to him about the problem of the restrooms and the expense of relocating the restrooms, he was able to understand better what the client's needs were. And then he went back and said, hey, you can get really close to your budget if you don't do this, which wasn't as important to the client, and then you move this over here, and that still works for the client, but it shaves an enormous amount of money out of the budget. And this was, usually that discussion is with the architect, and then we sent a plan that worked back to the architect, and they said, yeah, that'll work. And then, we ended up only about $40,000 over the budget, and the broker was very happy because he really just cares about getting the deal done, not anything else. But everybody got what they want. It was that project manager taking the initiative to say, let me see if I can find an outside the box solution. But that's not typically what a project manager will do, but it's getting to where, it's more effective and gives you a competitive advantage if you can help make those deals happen and help everybody win.
Right. Do you think that, we've got a lot of newer project managers that are coming into the industry today. We've got a lot of construction management programs, and people are graduating from school and they're coming into the industry and they're very green. Do you think that some of those, and this wasn't a question that I gave you, it was just something that has popped into my mind, but do you think that the experience plays a role in getting to a point where you can see through the weeds enough that, hey, if I just go have a conversation, that may make all the difference in the world. Do you think that that's something that just over time and experience, your project managers are able to learn how to deal more with clients in addition to that just being something that they're naturally gifted at doing and being good communicators?
Tracy, as you said, a younger PM right out of school, for instance, or a couple years into their career, maybe they've been a project engineer, now it's their first assignment as a PM. It can be a little bit daunting. This young PM may be dealing with a high-level CEO or founder of their own company or whatever else. And, it can be a little bit intimidating for them to, go open up a conversation with it, under those scenarios and stuff. And as they mature and get older, it becomes easier to do so. And I think, another good point Craig had is he mentioned the PM said to the broker, can I go see the client? I think more and more is, remember the commercial from 10, 12 years ago? The more ways there are to get in touch with people, the less ways there actually are to get a real person on the phone. And I think in today's environment, everybody's busy, and you can send a text, you can send an email, you can do a Zoom call, but in my mind, not much beats a good old-fashioned face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. And one of the things I think that not all, but many of the younger people just getting out of school, their communication style is typically through text. And so a lot of what I've seen is the information short and to the point, but not all the information is there to make a decision. And so it's trying to, coach them on, okay, you can't just send that because you're about to ruin their day when you tell them it's not happening. You've got to, say, okay, this is what's happening. And I think the solution here is to go do this. But a lot of times it's just, and then it's like, you're surprised that they're upset. Why are you surprised? You didn't give them any information or any desire for hope or any path forward. It's like, what is the cause and how do you make a suggestion? So it's a lot of extra coaching because you can't text people. I mean, you can't have conversations like you text when you're talking about, this is somebody's building that, you just have to be a better communicator.
Yeah. Share some ways that you've gone about finding some of your key personnel. And I want us to talk about when you find them, how do you hang on to them? How do you keep and retain those key people that you find? What are some ways that you've gone about searching for some of these project managers?
Tracy, I'm proud to say that we have actually gotten to the point where we are not searching for people as much as they're finding us. Some of our biggest success stories are people who reach out to us. We got a PM who's been with us for 5 years now. He reached out to us. He and his future wife were moving here to Charleston. He researched us and he reached out on the phone and said, I want to come work for you guys. I mean, not I want to find out more about you, but I want to come work. And we've had a couple of those. And we've got probably 4 or 5 or 6 of our field guys who came to us through people that we already employed, either friends of a friend or whatever else. And it's certainly way easier to do that than it is to just blindly comb through 100 resumes and hope that the culture and the fit's going to be right, because you can hire people too, but the other part of it is making sure that they're going to fit into the culture and be a good team member, get along well with all the other employees, people who've been here for 10 years or 18 years or whatever else, and make sure they're a good fit across the board with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for us, it's we get a lot of word of mouth. We're very fortunate that we don't have a whole lot of people leave us. We have a very high retainage rate, and we focus a lot of efforts on retaining the people because there is a direct cost. If we lose a project manager, there is a large cost associated with that, just in the time, because no matter how great of a job they do trying to leave on a good note, there's always a mess left behind. And then trying to get somebody up and trained it's very expensive. So we spend a lot of effort trying to make sure the culture's good. They don't want to leave. And then we get a lot of people through word of mouth. I also really like hiring people from other places because I think it's kind of a clean break. Sometimes we've hired from our competitors, and I feel like I spend more time detraining them than I do training them. And I'm sure John knows what I'm talking about, but because trying to break old habits, and it's like, well, we don't teach we don't treat our subcontractors like that. That's not what we do, so, but, for me, it's kind of funny. People, as a CEO, I have a lot of responsibilities, but if you ask me what the most important thing that I do is, it's very simply hiring.
I'm curious for both of you gentlemen. If you look at your PMs today, roughly how many came to the company from the outside as into the project manager role versus being promoted from within into the PM role?
Mm.
So here at J. Musselman, in addition to myself, we have 3 other dedicated PMs. One of them just celebrated 12 years with us, came to us completely from outside the construction industry. He was in the transportation intermodal industry before that. So he is a true, ground up build. He's been a PM with us now for about 2 years. Another guy, Vance Alexander, who's our vice president, has been with us for 18 plus years. And he came to us as a part-time job while he wanted to get into dental school. And he had some residential experience, and he came to us, worked in the field for about 1.5 years, and then came into the office, and, we've grown him right up through the ranks. And then a third one, Nick Burt, he came to us out of school from Ohio State with a construction management degree, but just about 1.5 years out. So, and he's been with us for 5 years. So I feel like we've really, brought him up, even though he had a little bit of experience. We didn't have a lot of bad habits to correct, as Craig was mentioning a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of mold and shape them that way.
Mm-hmm.
It is very true. And the odd thing for us is, when you're a good project manager, you have to be part marketing person, because the clients need to like you, because they got to pick you for the job. You got to be part estimator, you got to be part accountant, part manager, and then, financial person, close everything out. And it's just, nobody's ever good at all of those. But, the one thing that we do is, the keys for us are, when we interview people, we have a very hard interview process, and it's very lengthy because it's just so important. But I look for people that are humble, because if they're humble, they're coachable, and they want to help everybody around them, which means that when a project manager's in the ditch, they're not too proud to say, guys, can I get some help? And then, because we have 9 project managers here and probably 20 superintendents in the field, and we really encourage like collaboration in the office, so people aren't just stuck in a silo, but being humble and hungry. You cannot teach somebody to be hungry, and you don't want somebody who's not going to be a go-getter, because it's not always an easy job, and you need somebody that's going to go after it and be successful, and obviously smart too. But because you can train everything else, but you cannot train somebody to be humble or hungry or smart. And I have all kind of trick questions in the interviews to identify the humble piece.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I something that you guys said was that, you both have been fairly established where you're at, to where people are looking up DWC and Jon Musselman, and they're coming to you. And I think that that speaks a lot to the culture of your company. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of culture that you guys place in. Craig, I know we've talked in the past, Craig Fulcher, we've talked in the past about being a good culture fit at DWC and how important that is for you. And now just hearing you say that you've got some interview questions that kind of help to show whether or not that person is going to be a good fit in your culture as you're going through the interview process. So what role does hiring for attitude play in creating a strong and productive team and making sure that they fit well within the culture of your companies?
It's really, it is the most important thing because I feel like I'm really good at hiring. That's because I've made so many colossal mistakes early in my career that I've learned my lesson. And the worst mistake was when I hired I wasn't really sold on either of the individuals, and I both felt like they had issues, but I really needed to hire somebody, and I made a foolish mistake to hire based on need. And I hired both of them thinking one of them would work out, and it was very valuable for me because I learned so much from that, because not only did they stick around for 3 years, but they really were a major negative impact on the culture until they both finally until they both exited. And so I learned then that I don't care if I need somebody right now and it takes me 6 months to find the right person, that means I'll have years of happiness instead of years of misery trying to fix the problem and then trying to figure out how to get rid of them. But it's just so important now, and it's crucial. And it's because of that, we've got a really great team, and we have a bid that goes out, and we'll have 4 or 5 people in the conference room going through the details, questioning why we have this number in here. And the project manager's not like, too arrogant to listen. They're humble, and they're just like, yeah, well, I want to win the job. That sounds great, And then it helps our win ratio. It helps our quality of life because everybody's working together, because everybody goes through a cycle where they're just in the weeds and they're drowning. And it's nice to know that, they can call people in to help out.
The collaboration and teamwork is so important, Tracy, as Craig just said. And, we, as we're interviewing, our typical interview process starts with, if we're looking for somebody for a position and we get a resume come in, generally might route it through myself and maybe Vance, and, we like or don't like the resume, and have one of the PAs typically make the initial phone call, not myself or Vance, but see what the PA thinks and how this applicant reacts and treats her on the phone and get her first thoughts. And if she likes it enough, then I generally make a follow-up call. Same thing, a few minutes of a small chat, make sure I feel warm and fuzzy with them. And then when we bring them in, we try and introduce them to as many people in the company as we can, as many people in the office as possible. Everybody who's in the office that day talks to them for 15 to 30 minutes. Couple reasons, our superintendents and our PMs both, they are working with, again, very high level individuals, as well as interacting with laborers on the job site, temporary laborers even. And how they treat all of our staff is going to be a good indicator of how they treat everybody else. I don't want somebody who's going to come in and be warm and fuzzy with me and not be warm and fuzzy with the rest of the team. I want them to be able to reach out to each other and have good rapport and camaraderie with each other.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you share an experience of somebody that you've interviewed that didn't work out, and why?
We interviewed for a superintendent role 7 or 8 years ago, and everybody kind of had a warm and fuzzy about this gentleman, but not quite over the top. I couldn't really put my finger on it. And when he pulled out of the driveway, out of our office, he stopped at the edge of the driveway, and our receptionist was able to see a rear window sticker that did not resonate with any of us. And that was all we needed to say, nope, not going to happen. So
that's funny that you say that, because one of my I have so many interview quirks, but one of the things I do is when they're waiting in the lobby, I go outside and look at the back of their truck or car and see what they're promoting on their vehicle, because they're going to be upsetting somebody on the job site if it's not appropriate.
Right.
And the other great thing about what Jon does, having other team members meet with them, is it gives a great perspective, but if you go back to that team member, say, what do you think about him? I like him. I think you should hire him. Then all of a sudden they have ownership over that person's hiring, which makes them want to help them when they come to the office, because I helped this guy get a job. I'm gonna make sure he gets off to a fast start.
Yeah.
And that
Teamwork.
team effort approach, which I agree, especially for key hires, it absolutely needs to be sort of a cross-functional exercise so you can get a lot of different perspectives from different people that the PMs will ultimately need to work with. But have you developed any kind of a PM prospect scorecard? So everyone's sort of talking off the same page and is using somewhat of a consistent grading system for as you go through these interviews?
A lot of times I think it's just kind of gut feel where they're like, because it's like, are you going to want to work with this person? And we kind of do what Jon does a lot. And then I'll have the PMs take that person to lunch.
Yeah.
And one of my questions is, how did they treat the wait staff? Did they say thanks, or did they just ignore them? But I have a lot of quirks like that, though. It's just little things. Like, don't wear cologne or perfume to an interview with me, because it's weird, but I'm like, you're making half the people like the way you smell. Either going to like the way you smell or they don't.
Craig, I'll go back to what you said about checking out the rear of somebody's truck. What are they promoting on the back of their truck, just as how they treat the waitress? These people end up becoming the face of our organizations. And, it reflects on all of us in how they treat others, as well as the values that they bring to the job site. Like you said, they're going to, depending on what the sticker is, they're going to upset 5 to 95% of that job site in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you guys communicate and reinforce your company values to new team members? Is that something, do you talk about your core values in your interview process and talk a little bit about your culture with that potential hire? Or in your teams, like how often are you reminding your current teams and your current project management staff of your core values and them living it out?
Tracy, for me, I'll go back to, again, everybody in the company or everybody in the office meets these individuals. But for me, if I don't want this person to be my next door neighbor, I probably don't want to work with them.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's like, are my clients going to like this person?
Yeah.
Tracy, as you know, here at Red Team, as far as, culture and reinforcing values, it's not a lot of people think of it as an executive team top-down exercise, right? It's not like we're up here on the mountain with the tablet. Here's our culture, here's our values. Let it be decreed, let it be so, right? It's very much building a culture is a grounds up exercise. And as you know, here at Red Team, every time we have an all hands, we dedicate a section to recognizing 1 or 2 people in the company that we pick one of our 5 values, which are the values that best sort of articulate our culture. And we will, through a nomination process, not by the executive team, but by the people's peers across the organization, nominate people, and we'll select 1 or 2 to highlight during an all hands to say, we'll pick one of our values for that all hands. And then we'll recognize 1 or 2 people who did something or do things consistently to best, display that particular value, which ultimately is the culture of the company. So it's very much a bottoms up exercise. Ultimately, culture grows from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, for us, core values are really the most important thing to us. We put this sign that has our core values on every job site. It's on the back of our back of our business cards. It's written in big letters all across our conference room. Yep. And we tell our project managers and superintendents that you can make decisions based on that. You have full authority.
Yeah.
And then every time we have a superintendent meeting or a company meeting, we try to tie those core values into it. And sometimes, to your question, we'll ask an interviewee, we'll point to the core values behind us and we'll just say, which one of these resonates most with you?
Mm.
That's great, Craig. In my experience, I've interacted with a lot of companies over the year, and it's pretty easy to tell the companies where the core values are just black ink on white paper or on a
Right.
wall in the lobby, and those where the core values are truly embraced and embodied by the company in the actions and deeds that are done every day. And it doesn't take long to figure out which companies fit into which one of those buckets. And that's why, John, when you say, well, people want to come work for you, I'm guessing that's probably one of the core reasons why, right? Your Musselman's recognized as a company that truly um, lives up to those values and acts on them every day.
Mm-hmm. And same with DWC. In my experience of observing DWC, I would say that that's true and lived out daily with your team as well. And it's impacted me from both of you. So I can imagine the experience with your clients and how that goes a very long way in a project manager as well.
There's one last thing on culture. There's an old saying, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's often attributed to the author, Peter Drucker. And that's actually not accurate. I did some research on this once. A guy by the name of Mark Fields, who was president of Ford, North America, had that sign on his door. And I think what he really means by that is, you can have the best plan in the world, but if the culture isn't going to let it happen, it's just going to die on the vine.
Yeah.
So strategy, planning, that's important. But at the end of the day, the culture has to allow that to happen.
We've talked a little bit about culture within the office, but we also have culture on the job site with our site superintendent. So how do you guys describe the culture on your job sites and how project managers and superintendents both have influence over that culture on the job site? Do you guys have a story of culture and shaping the job site for your teams?
I don't have a story, Tracy, but that PM and superintendent relationship has to be of teammates. They each have a different job to do, of course, but you can't have a successful project if those two are not very tight with each other. Able to discuss anything, share ideas, plan together, any of those type items.
How does that impact relationships with your tradespeople that are coming on and off your job sites, or architects and owners that may stop by for a walkthrough? How does that relationship between the two of them impact the overall quality of your job site?
Well, Craig, I'm not sure how you guys are structured, but our PMs are predominantly in the office on job sites, maybe for a weekly meeting or something like that. And honestly, we have so many out of town clients anymore, and everything's changed since COVID. Our PMs are doing a lot of weekly Zoom calls and stuff, not even on the job site, with the clients, except maybe at initial kickoff or a final walkthrough. And they're in and out of the job site other times as conditions dictate. So it's important that our clients feel comfortable walking the job site with a superintendent, knowing that anything they relay to the superintendent will get shared to whoever on the project team needs to know it, whether it's a project manager because it's pending changes and the design team because it's pending changes, or whether, whatever else comes up during a walkthrough. And conversely, we need to know that if the PM gets information, again, via a conference call or an email or whatever, that the PM is going to share that information, readily with all the other members of the team, particularly the superintendent, in a timely manner.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with our third bullet point here. And, how is the site going along when nobody's watching. You know, the project manager is in the office, but they have a very intricate relationship with the site superintendent and have full confidence that the culture of the site is going to be such that they're going to live out the company values when nobody's watching, to make sure that the project goes smoothly and everybody is treating each other with respect on the job site. I know that probably likely goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it's really key, kind of like Jon was saying, if the superintendent and project manager, at our company, we tell everybody, superintendents, project managers, carpenters, accountants, everybody is just as important as everybody else, and there would be no company without the other person. And if a superintendent and a project manager are both focused on the same effort, we even tell our project managers, take pizza over there, show appreciation, show those guys some love, because the worst thing that you can happen is somebody comes on the job site and the message the project manager is telling them and the message the superintendent are telling them are different. You will have a major client meltdown if they're hearing conflicting information, because it just says you guys don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you're not on the same page. And so having that kind of trust where, honestly, when I first started working here 24 years ago, it was a lot of finger pointing between the project managers and the superintendents, which I think was crucial back then. Which was not crucial, but which was typical back in those days. But now it's a lot of like, okay, let's work together and let's, how can I help you? And it's important for the project manager to be willing to jump in the trenches and help the superintendent when they get in a jam.
Yeah. Tracy, I had a situation a couple years out of school back in the early 90s on a big job out of town. And there's three of us site guys all living together, good rapport, good bonding, great group of subs. We had great rapport with all of them. The owner would come in town, not the owner of our company, but our client would come into town, good rapport. And then we had our project manager. And Craig, humble was not in his vocabulary. When he came to the job site every other week, completely different atmosphere in our field office. The subcontractors didn't like him. We didn't really like him. The owner didn't like him. And finally got, 3 months in the job where the owner just went to our vice president and said, this guy's got to go. And our management replaced him as a PM. And the attitude after that on the job site was night and day difference.
Wow.
Yep.
That speaks a lot
Yeah.
to who they like, right? The previous slide where we were talking about hiring for attitude, that makes a big difference. And we talked about, as we were preparing for this webinar, how much that mindset has changed over the last 25 years of how we treat people on the job site in order to get things done has really almost flipped from old school to new school to more collaborative approach to treating people with respect and kindness instead of pointing fingers and screaming. And that makes a big difference in the culture of the job and the confidence that an owner may have in getting their project to fruition. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. All right, for this one, for leadership behaviors that matter, we talked a little bit about what strong leadership on the job site looks like and how project managers can help influence that. How do project managers help to reinforce accountability nowadays without creating conflict? We just talked about, it used to be we were pointing fingers and screaming, but how do your project managers today help to reinforce that accountability without pointing fingers and screaming and causing conflict, but working together to get to the end of the job? Have you guys, can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that shift and how your project managers kind of help to really work on those and build those relationships with your tradespeople in order to get the project to completion?
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of it's just a different mindset, where I think the old days, it was like, how much can I yell to get somebody to listen? But now I think kind of having a how can I help mentality. it's like, okay, superintendent, what do you need help with? What can I do? Do you may call somebody's boss and see if I can get them on the job site? Or even when you got a subcontractor who's not doing what they were supposed to do, what they agreed to, then it's calling the subcontractor and say, hey, I've got to have you done on Friday. What can I do to help you? And, do you need me to bring in another paint crew to help you finish up? Or because I'm happy to do that because we got to make this date, but what can I do to help you?
Yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as that, Craig, taking your hat off, putting it in your hand and reaching out to the subcontractor and, telling them, we need your help. It may not be anything that was any delay of yours, but the team needs your help in order to pull it through.
I want to talk a little bit now about how do you guys utilize technology in helping to foster this environment? Are there some specific tools that you guys use today that help keep the collaboration alive between all parties on your team? Can you guys share some experiences with how you utilize technology tools today that your project managers may use and that your teams in the field may use to get more visibility and alignment as a team?
Tech has certainly changed so much, Tracy, in the 30 plus years I've been in the commercial arena. I tell our younger folks, we have email and we're so accustomed anymore to almost instantaneous responses. Our red team default is set on when we send a submittal out that is 1 day for a response. We don't really, expect a 1 day response, but it's great we do. But I look back in the old days, I was 3 months out of college and working for a firm out of Columbia, South Carolina, and I was on a job in Chattanooga. And the design team was in Columbia, and a subcontractor would call me and say, hey, I've got 7 3-ring binders of HVAC submittals. You want us to drop them by? Are you going to come pick them up? And I'd be like, yeah, we'll get over there tomorrow and pick them up and drive over there, pick them up, go back and flip the page on this whole 3-ring binder, stamp the front of each of them. And then the next day, put them in a big box, take them to, depending on how critical they were, the post office or maybe even the UPS store, mail them off and hope whoever got them 3 days later, and we'd get them back in 3 or 4 weeks, and nowadays they come in PDF and you look at them, you stamp them in RedTeam and you hit click and send, very, very more efficient, way more efficient.
Yeah. And for us, our general concept is always, like I mentioned before, the project manager's role is getting more difficult to find, more difficult to train. So how can you put, how do we use technology to make the project manager do more work with the same amount of effort, not more? Right. And technology is really the key to that because, like Jon was saying, it's okay. Well, now we got to change in the drawings. Well, let's go. I got to print off a clean set, go to the job site, get red of all the old sets that have the wrong information on it now that, 3 walls have been added. And then, but now with, RedTeam, it's there instantaneously. And where it's really helpful because, I'm not even going to talk about when we used to fax bid invitations out, but when you use a product like RedTeam and you go through, you send your bid invitations out, and then they're uploaded into your estimate, and then the estimate is, easy to navigate, and then it instantly merges with the proposal, so we don't have to sit there and type it all out. It means a project manager can get an estimate and a proposal turned around so much faster because it just gets it done quicker and they can move on to other things. And then having the superintendent, having that information live in the field is an extremely huge benefit. And that gives us a big advantage over some of my competitors who are still using email and Word for their estimates and presentations. So it gives us a great advantage over that because time is everything.
Right. Yep. Right.
There was a time that, seems a long time ago, but probably not, where, contractors would still physically drive to a planning room somewhere to check out the plans and the specs, do their takeoffs and their estimates. My first foray into construction tech was with a company that was formed by a roofer who got tired of dealing with the traffic associated with that in the time. And so digitizing the plan room was sort of the value proposition that the company was built on. And today, while that seems more commonplace, but just, the act of having all that instantaneously at your fingertips, to your point, Craig, whether it's in PDF format or elsewise, but starting even before the shovels hit the ground, digitizing the plan room today and having all that information readily available, number one, and number two, just as importantly, able to collaborate on is really critical. And it's just an expectation really today, especially for younger people coming into the business who are spending most probably using this mostly as an interface.
Mhm.
They don't like to sit in front of, we're kind of old school here on this call. We still sit in front of screens sometimes, but most people today, this is their one way that they interface with the information that they need to get their job done. So it's definitely changed rapidly and is continuing to evolve,
Yeah.
not just from the beginning planning of the project, but all the way through closeout and beyond.
Yeah.
As you said, this is the key. And, it's great. Everybody can get the information at the exact same time. If submittal's approved and the link goes out, everybody can pull it up at the same time, instantaneous. And I'm amazed still how often I'm on a job site and a tradesperson might come up to our superintendent and ask a question, and he just pulls up the submittal, the approved submittal on his phone, and boom, 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 answers the question. None of this, meet me back at the job trailer in an hour and we'll pull up the binder and go through it. It's instantaneous.
All right. Well, we're getting down to the end of our time together this morning, but I wanted to touch on development of project managers within your organizations, and how do you, if we are getting some of our newer generation into the business, how are we creating project managers that we want and need? And so I wanted for you guys to share some practical ways that you guys are developing leadership skills within your younger project managers within your businesses.
For us, what we do a lot of times is we have senior project managers, and what they do is they partner with some of the younger guys, because a lot of times project managers aren't comfortable going to ask the boss what they think might be a stupid question, or the question that is I really love to hear is, I'm about to send this email. Will you read it to make sure it's okay? And I'm usually like, let's revisit this, because it's not because it's just not what they need to ask. But having a senior project manager is a great way for them to mentor, help them with the difficult things, which is really communicating with clients or seeing things that they might miss. And we even give our senior project managers a little bonus based on their team's production, which incentivizes them to want to help them. And so that's been really efficient for us.
Similar, Craig, we team new employees up with someone who's been here a while, for a matter of days or weeks, depending on what the role is, to help them feel comfortable with our processes, our procedures, and get to know the other teammates. Again, I want everybody to feel comfortable reaching out to their other peers for assistance and help. It doesn't have to come through me. If they need assistance, I want them to feel like they can reach out to 8 or 10 other people and get some assistance. And you have to give them the authority, to go out there and make decisions on their own. Again, it's great when they come to us and ask us a question or send me an email and say, can you look at this before I send it out? Did I capture what I need to? Is it the right tone? Whatever else. But they have to know that they have the authority to make some decisions on their own. Not every decision is going to be the decision I would have made, or that doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision. It just means that I might have done a little bit different, and they've got to feel out their own leadership style and what works for them.
Just to add to that, I tell my project managers, the young ones, I say, there's so many people here that want to help you. If you have a question and you don't ask, it's your fault.
Yeah, that's a great company culture, I think, aspect to have, in that don't be afraid to ask your questions. We're all here and we're all willing to help, and that's a great culture to have, to come into and be a part of. Jon, I'm going to ask you a question. What kind of training or career development do you wish you would have had when you were starting out as a project manager?
So, I wish I would have had more sales type training. And I don't really mean selling the sales portion. Believe it or not, as much as I've chatted here today, I'm truly an introvert at heart. So for me, going out and just cold calling on a client or whatever aspect of that didn't come naturally to me. And I wish I would have had, particularly early on in my career, some more opportunities, maybe just being thrown to the wolves and having to go out there and do those break the ice conversations and those type items.
Yeah. Craig Fulcher, what advice would you give to somebody who's early on in their project management career that wants to become a strong leader? What would you say to them to encourage them?
Well, I think one of the things we try to encourage we actually have a book club here where we encourage people to read leadership books. We actually pay them anywhere from $50 to $100 for reading leadership books and books on organization and things like that. I wish I had read more books early. That would have helped me a lot, just because there's so much good information out there about leadership. But I think that would be the key thing is, and I wish I had a good mentor in my early days, because that would have saved me a lot of stressful moments for sure.
Yeah,
I think to the degree you can promote that mentorship kind of aspect, and you've both referenced it, that's really important. And while I didn't grow up in the construction industry or as a PM, I think back throughout my career, I can think of 3 different mentors in particular that had such a huge impact on me and my development.
yeah.
Unlike you, Jon, I am kind of a career sales guy, but I will tell you that if I could wind back the clock, I think early in my career, if I had been trained on better listening skills, I think it's such an important. We're born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them proportionately. And even if you're in a sales role, which has sort of the stereotypical connotation of being a good fast talker, the best salespeople and the best people in any role, I think, are really good listeners. And
that's why introverts are better listeners, which means they typically run the world. So
that's right.
There you go.
That is exactly right. That's probably the drop the mic moment for this webcast.
That is, well, I want to give an opportunity, great segue into letting our folks that are on the call today be able to connect with you guys. So we've got some QR codes here for connecting with Jon and Craig on LinkedIn. And then if you are new to technology and wanting to learn more about how Red Team might be able to come alongside and partner with your business in helping you to gain some efficiencies and grow, we would love for you to book a meeting with us and talk to our team a little bit more about how we might be able to help you do that with either our Red Team Go or Red Team Flex products. So click on these QR codes and we would be happy to connect with you going forward. I want to thank all 3 of you for joining this webinar today. Your insights are very valuable, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And I gained a lot from this webinar, and I know our listeners did too. So thank you for being Red Team clients and allowing Red Team to be part of your business and in your growth. And thank you for partnering with us and sharing your experiences with us here in our webinar today.